Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. Today we're doing part 2 on the Harley Street Glide of the Screaming Eagle compensator diagnosis, replacement, inspection, whatever. If you haven't seen part 1 yet, go check that out. We talk about the issues we were having, the symptoms that we were having. We tear into the primary case, look at the compensator, disassemble everything, compare the old compensator to the new one that we're replacing it with, and we kind of stumble upon some surprises as we go. In this video, we're going to put all this stuff back together. So today's going to be a pretty good day for this. So we're going to get her back together as quick as we can and go for a ride. Let's get started. So the first thing I want to do in getting all this stuff back together is get this plastic oil deflector installed here in the primary cover. I want to get that going first with the epoxy. That way, while we're putting all the parts back on the bike itself, the compensator and the clutch and all that kind of thing, this can be drying. And once we get around to time to put the cover on and fill it with oil, this stuff will have already had time to set up, and we won't have any issues. As I said yesterday, the JB weld I got says that it's made for adhering plastic to metals. So I think it's going to be just what we need temperature wise. I don't know. It's good. That's what we need. So we need to clean the inside of the cover and the back of the oil deflector with rubbing alcohol to make sure we're going to get a good bond. The inside of this cover is pretty rough, porous, I guess, for lack of a better word. So we shouldn't have any kind of issue with the deflector and the epoxy sticking to this metal surface in here. Yeah, that's pretty much almost dry already. So by the time we get this epoxy mixed up, it will be good to go. You have to mix this stuff together. As you squeeze it out of the tube, equal amounts of the stuff comes out. So what we're going to do here is put some, that should be plenty. We'll put some on the back of this cardboard packaging. Put our lid back on. I'll give you half of a popsicle stick to mix it up with. So you want to mix it until you got a uniform mixture and you don't see two separate colors anymore. You see just one solid color. JB Weld in general is really good stuff. Can be used for a lot of different things. It's really tough as far as holding together and doing what it's supposed to. The Project Farm channel on YouTube has done, he's pretty neat channel. If you haven't seen it yet, you need to go check that out. But he does a lot of tests of different kind of things, motor oils, comparing one to another, penetrating oils, batteries, jacks, all kinds of different stuff just off the top of my head. But he does do one on JB Weld and things like JB Weld, other brands that do kind of the same thing. And he does them in, I don't know what you would call, I guess, a scientific kind of a way. It's not just his opinion of which one's better or which one's worse. It's actual side-by-side testing in a very professional kind of way. Press this guy in, slide it into position. I'm going to put this little metal clip over the deflector in the inside of the case. And then I'm also going to put the C-clamp on there like I talked about. And again, I've got a rag down on the bottom between the outside of the primary cover and the C-clamp where it doesn't hurt the finish putting scratches on it or whatever. Like I said, I wanted to get this put into place so that, yeah. So it's a good idea to put this clamp on it because I saw as I was tightening the clamp, I could see, find something to point with here. I don't know if you can see or not, but right here, the edge of the deflector, I can see where some JB Weld squeezed out from under it as I clamped it down. So in other words, it's a good idea to clamp it down, make sure it's held firm while this stuff sets. Now that can be setting up while we do the rest of this stuff. First thing we got to put in, I guess, is the new rotor. I need to move you guys so you can see what's happening over here. So to kind of catch you up with where we're starting out here, part one, we disassembled everything, started cleaning. That's where we're starting part two here. We've got the entire inside of the case cleaned up, blew it out, or well, washed it down with brake clean to get any little oil or chips or whatever else might be back in here. We hosed it down with brake clean real good, let it drain, blew it out with compressed air around the bearings, around the starter, all around the stator back in here, so we're sure that everything's clean. Every whatever was in there is gone, and we're starting out fresh and clean. All right, we had a little technical difficulty there. I thought I was recording, decided to check, and in fact it was not recording. So I don't know what you missed out on, but what I did, I initially slid this up on there, then realized I had to put Loctite on the clutch nut thread, so I took this back off, put my Loctite on the threads of the shaft, slid it back on, and started the clutch nut. That's all you've missed so far. Now we're going to start building our compensator stuff up here. We need the washers, we need this gear. Okay, so we're ready to start putting this compensator together. I'm just reading over the directions here to kind of make sure which way these, basically just this thin Belleville washer, which way it faces. Does it go like that or does it go like that? Correct answer is it goes like this. So pretty straightforward. Just talks about lubing everything up with a thin layer of primary oil. Makes sense. Okay, so that's easy enough. So we've got our bolt here to hold all of it together once we get it in there. The new bolt, as I talked about in the first video, is a Torx bit. You need a Torx bit for it. T70. I think that was I know that's another special tool that we need for this job. I don't know if I mentioned it in part one or not when I was going over the extra stuff you're going to need to do this, besides just basic hand tools. I don't think I did, but there it is. So I'm gonna get a little more primary oil on my finger, kind of moisten everything up, for lack of a better term. Make stuff slide together easy. No dry startups. So this gear here that I have in my hand can go on the splines either way physically, but you have to put it on a certain way. You can see back here, the splines on this end they don't go all the way to the end of the gear. So it has to go on the engine this way with these splines back against the rotor. If you put it on there backwards, you won't be able to get anything else on it. All right, so that's all the way on there, back against the rotor. Next, we want to put on our Belleville washers. These really don't hang on to anything. They just kind of get sandwiched in between the parts in here. I'm still going to put a little bit of lube around them where they're going to touch each other. So these just slide over the gear we just put on there. Let's make sure that gear stays slid all the way back against the rotor. If it slides out this way, one of these washers could drop down behind it between the gear and the rotor. We don't want that. So where these washers are going to touch each other, I'm just putting a little lube. Maybe not necessary, but we're going to do it anyway. You put the big ones on first, back against the rotor, then the medium-sized ones, and then lastly, the small thin one. Again, like I said in part one, these washers are the same, look the same, feel the same thickness as the version 1 Screamin' Eagle kit that was in here when we took it apart. I guess I should have realized when I did the primary maintenance video, I had the primary cover off then and we looked at all this, but I didn't realize at the time that I was looking at an aftermarket compensator. At that time, I hadn't done any research into, what the factory compensator looked like or whatever. So I looked at it, but it just didn't occur to me that it was an aftermarket. So lubing up the ramps, the back of this gear, where it's going to contact the Belleville washers. Now we'll just slide that baby on there. We're getting to the point where we're going to have to get our chain involved and everything here. Now, for my next trick, I am 99% sure we can get that through the chain. Let's see. If we can, I'll stop and take this back apart and lube it up. Let's make sure we can get it put together like this. I'm going to have to get this where it's in the low part of the ramps. Yeah, so we can do it that way. We can get it on that way. So, take this back out of here for now. Lube it up with everything. We got lube in here. We got our flat washer on each side of the bearing. That'll go back in this gear that we've got lubed up. Put a little more on the splines in here. All right, now I can start this back in the chain. Making sure you're still with me, folks. We had that incident earlier where I was not recording when I thought I was. So we got to kind of guide the chain up in the case, guide the gears together, get the spline started, and all that while we're going. So everything there just fell into place. Everything's where it needs to be. The washers haven't slid down, so we're in good shape to put that bolt in there. I'm gonna run this bolt in, get everything hand tight with both the compensator nut, or the compensator bolt here that we're putting in, and the clutch nut. Then we can put our locking tool in here and torque everything down like it needs to be. Go back here and tighten up this clutch nut. Again, the clutch, goodness sakes. Again, the clutch nut is left-handed thread, so we need to turn the nut to the left as if we would be loosening it. Okay, so we've got that down finger tight, basically. We've got that down finger tight. So now we can put our block in to hold everything and start torquing. I'm going to torque the clutch nut first. So we're going to put our block on the bottom. Because we're rotating everything this way, it's going to try and pull that block into the gear. Excuse me, and lock that up where it'll hold. I believe the spec was 70. I looked it up here a minute ago. Clutch nut threads, install and tighten the clutch nut to 70 to 80 foot-pounds. All right, so I've got my torque wrench set on the middle of that range, 75. So all right, so torque this baby down. All right, so this fancy torque wrench, when you set it to the spec you want, so 75 there, and as you start getting close to the torque, it begins beeping, and then when you hear the solid tone, that means you're at the torque that you set it for. So you'll notice that I torqued it. The tone went solid. I let off. I torqued it again until the tone went solid, and then I held it there. And what that does is while you're holding it there, it gives everything a chance, the threads a chance to stretch and everything to kind of settle to make sure you're actually at that torque. So I'm going to tighten that baby up next. So now we can go ahead and put the tensioner in. This is an automatic tensioner, like I talked about yesterday. We've got these two little spacers that go on the back of it. So these little spacers have a lip on them. You see that little lip sticking up on the top of it there? That side's perfectly flat. That little lip goes in, there's a little recess in the tensioner that those spacers sit into. The spacers go between, they don't go on the floor, but those spacers go in between the tensioner and the case. Don't forget to put those in there. We need to get our tensioner down. So I'm getting this tensioner. Oh baby. Got to get this tensioner lowered all the way where we can get it under the spring where we want. It's hard to hold the stuff when it's all oily. Okay. I'm going to try and do this here. This is one of these instances where you need 3 more fingers than you actually have. Ooh. 3 more fingers than you actually have to hold all this stuff together. Let's see if I can get that in there. So I've got to get the tensioner slid up here under the chain. I've got to get, yeah, that ain't gonna work. I'm gonna have to, where did the other spacer go now? I'm gonna have to get the tensioner all the way collapsed so that it will fit under the chain. And meanwhile, while I'm doing that, I have to hold tension on it, because as soon as I let it go or release a little bit of tension, it wants to adjust and take the slack out, which we don't have any slack because it's not in there. So it springs up. Oh, where the crap did the bolt go? This won't be bad once we get it under the chain, I think. We'll be in good shape then. I want to make sure that spacer's in there. I can feel that. That spacer's in there. So we got both spacers in. I'm going to try and tighten these bolts down. Finger tight. Oh, somebody just pulled the driveway. Man, UPS man. All right, so tighten these bolts down, finger tight. That way everything is snugged up and where it's supposed to be. At that point, I can take my finger off of it to let the automatic tensioner do its thing. It'd be handy if I was left-handed or whatever. All right. All right, so bolts are snugged up, spacers are in place, and now I'm going to let pressure off of this. Of course, it's not going to move, so that's fine. What are you telling me here? I need to get back in the book, find the torque spec for those 2 small bolts. Compensating bolt is torqued, clutch nut is torqued. These are torqued off camera. Chain's where it's supposed to be. So we're moving right along here. Next, I'm going to put in this push rod for the clutch. Make sure that don't have any junk on it. Put a little lube on each end where it's going to touch. Remember, like I said yesterday, you need to put that back in the same direction that it came out, which we laid it over here out of the way, so I'm sure that it is. Put the clutch adjustment back in there. It's got these little wings on the side of it, so it'll only slide back in there one way. Those have to go into some grooves. Put the snap ring back in it. You probably already know this, but putting snap rings in is kind of, I don't know, it seems like one extreme or the other. Either you get it in on the first try, don't have any issue, or it flies off, you got to go find it, you struggle with it. Like I said yesterday, keep a finger on it so that it does not go flying. You can at least knock it down. So that went right in there. That was making me look like I know what I'm doing. Went right in there. Take this Allen wrench. I don't know if you just saw that or if the light's in the way, but as I pushed on it, it snapped back in the groove like we want. So if you don't push on it, you know, it's possible that it did not snap back in the groove like you need, and then you run the risk of it flying out after you get everything back together. This one's all the way in the groove. I got a bag. I'll show you the bag of them here. I got a bag of these O-rings on Amazon, I believe. Pretty sure. Here's the O-rings that I got. Part number and brand and everything. But it's a bag. I think there's 50 in here. Yeah, it says drain plug O-ring 50 pack. So these will last forever. Or almost. They're really cheap. I don't remember what I paid for them. $5 or less, I think. Maybe 10 at the most. So, another thing you need to do when you put an O-ring in, instead of just pushing it down on the threads like I just did, you want to get a pick underneath of it. And you want to go in at such an angle like this, where you don't poke a hole in the O-ring or cut it. If you go in like this, right, there's a good chance you're going to cut it, poke a hole in it. So you want to put the end of the pick under the O-ring and then just circle around the drain plug a few times like this. And what that does is if that O-ring is twisted from shoving it down on there, it will let the twist come out of it and it'll seal a lot better. If the O-ring's twisted, it won't seal nearly as well, and you run a risk of cutting the O-ring if it's twisted when you're putting it back in the hole. So I've got the drain plug cleaned off good. Nothing on it. New O-ring on there, lubed up the O-ring. So we're going to snug that down here while we're thinking about it. And then we can go to putting the primary cover on. 5/8 for the drain plug. Doesn't have to be super tight. So right there is just kind of finger tight. Just about that much more. The O-ring seal is a really good seal, and it doesn't require a whole lot of torque on the drain plug for it to seal really well. All right, so we got all that out of the way. Triple check everything again. Make sure we're not forgetting anything. Snap rings in there. That the clutch nut's torqued down. Clutch push rod and all that's back together. And verify it works a couple of times. This is another good thing to do to verify that the snap ring is in position. Just operate the clutch a few times, because it's going to push against that O-ring when you're pulling the clutch handle in. And if that snap ring is not where it's supposed to be, it'll spit it out right then. You want to do it while you've got it open like this, obviously, so if it does spit it out, you can fix it. You don't want to get your primary cover back on there, fluid back in it, floorboards back on, and you pull the clutch lever in and you hear the ka-ching inside here. Now you got to take all that stuff back apart, drain oil and all that. So, chain's where it's supposed to be. Compensator's all put together, pre-lubed, bolts in and torqued. Everything looks perfect in there, just like it should. Nothing laying in the bottom of the case. We got the drain plug in. So, I'm going to clean up the work area here a little bit, get rid of some of these tools we don't need anymore. And we'll put the primary cover on. Okay, we're getting back after it again. I took lunch and everything. Give this a little more time to dry. It's probably been total couple hours now since we glued this down earlier in the video. So set time on the package said 15 minutes, so I feel for sure it's good now. Oh yeah, it's nice and solid in there. That's glued in there good. Clips on there good. Everything's clean. We go ahead and put this back on there now. Remember, we had 3 long bolts up here in the front because they go through the cover and into the engine. We've also got a couple of dowel pins to line everything up and hold the cover in place. I'm going to get my little impact driver, 1/4-inch impact driver, to run these bolts down. Obviously, you don't want to tighten them with this. All I'm going to be doing is just running them down to where they touch, and then I'll tighten them and torque them by hand. Big time running in here with this versus every bolt my hand away from just started to. So, but you got to be careful with those because you can, these bolts go into aluminum, so it don't take much to tighten them too much and strip out the threads. So now that I got them snug down, we'll go around and just make sure they're tight. Not very much torque on these bolts, just about like the drain plug, just a little bit past finger tight. Harley's really come a long way in sealing technology, I guess you'd call it. Back in the shovelhead days, everything leaked. And these twin cams, it's not just because it's a twin cam, it's the upgrades in machining processes and tolerances and gasket material and whatever. But if you take a little bit of care while you're putting these things together, you won't have any leaks. All right, so primary cover's back on. All the bolts are tight. Drain plug's back in it and tight. So now we can go ahead and put our primary fluid in here. Get that filled up. All right, well, it's going to be the funnel I use today. I think I said in part 1, I think I mentioned that I closed my auto repair shop down, which the why and all that will be in another video. But moral of the story is I've had a lot of stuff to move. And of course, when you're moving, things get misplaced or you forget where you set them. You're going to organize stuff later. And I'm still in that process of moving stuff out of storage back here to my garage and getting everything set up where I want it. That's okay. We're fighting through it. Since we didn't take the primary case off, but we did make sure that all the oil was out around the stator back in kind of those low spots and so forth. So I think what I'm going to do is fill it up now to where the level belongs. Then I'm going to put the derby cover on with a bolt or two, start it, let the oil circulate around in the primary, and then kind of double check the level, top it off if I need to from that point. So the oil is up to where I want it. As I said, I'm going to go ahead and put the derby cover on with just a bolt or two to keep whatever oil slinging around in there while it's running, to keep it inside. Okay. Full of oil. Everything's put back together. I think we're going to go ahead and start it up. See what happens here. What in the world is that rattling? Oh, probably that right there, I bet. All right, I'm tickled. Everything's in good shape. Starting good, charging good. Clutch seems to work fine. So, like I said, I'm going to pull this derby cover back off, get another look at the oil level in the primary. All right, so it looks like we do need just another little bit of oil. I mean, actually, we're probably just fine. Yeah, we're just fine right there, I'd say. Because by the time it... I need to put a little more in. You don't want to get it too full, because then you'll have a hard time coming out of neutral. Or finding neutral, I should say. You get too much oil in there, it will make the clutch drag. Even though you've got the handle pulled in, it will make enough drag between the clutch discs that it will be hard to get it in and out of gear. Or not in and out of gear. Again, it'll make it hard to find neutral. I'm just taking the end of my light and kind of checking the movement in the chain up there. That's good. We've got good oil splashing around in there. It looks like everything's dripping and covered in oil, so that's great. Okay. So we are done in there as far as I'm concerned. All right, so we got that all buttoned up. We'll put this bracket back on here. We are not that far from being able to go for a ride. But no, as I was saying earlier, this job hasn't been that bad. This is the first compensator I've ever done on one of these bikes, so I didn't have any previous experience or whatever to kind of be ahead of the game as far as time-wise on doing this. But everything's went pretty smooth and pretty easy. And definitely the instructions in the manual and in the new parts kit were easy to follow, and everything was pretty easy to do. Then you're thinking about doing this yourself. I I think it's something that anybody with a little bit of mechanical aptitude can do on their own at home. So, as long as you're careful and pay attention to what you're doing and those kinds of things, like you should anyway, I don't think you have any problem at all. All right, so that's all done. We'll put the heel shifter back on. We will be just about done. I think I covered this in the maintenance video, but you can put the heel shifter just about anywhere you want. Both shifters, actually. You can, let me show you. Even the front shifter, you can see what I'm doing here. You can see what I'm doing. So even the front shifter, there's no master spline on this shifter shaft. So you can put these wherever it's comfortable for you, right? The only thing you have to make sure of is on the heel shifter, you got to watch this distance right here, because when you upshift, this is going to come down toward the floorboard, and you want to make sure you got enough room between the two there that you can get all the way into gear. Okay, this one is right. This one's perfect. Where I just slid it on there, it just happened to be in that spot where it was perfect. If I went any lower, with this shifter, it would hit the floorboard when you're trying to shift, and it would not allow the transmission to go all the way into gear. No big deal. Get the kickstand about the way. All right, so I think that's it. Shifter's on and tight. Shifter's on and tight, adjusted good. Floorboards are on and tight. Derby cover's back on. Filled with oil. Don't have any spare parts laying around. That's always nice. So I think we're done, folks. I'm going to get it down off the lift, take it for a ride, see how everything goes running down the road. All right, so I just got back from about a 40-mile test ride. Everything went great. The bike seems to start great, shifts great, feels fine. It may feel a little more solid, stronger. I'm not really sure how to describe it than it did with the other compensator, but that very well may be just all in my head because I know we put new parts in it. So, subconsciously I'm looking for something to be better than it was before. But no issues. I did notice when you shut it off, it did have like a clunk clunk when the engine would stop. That's gone now. Starting issues seem to be gone so far. I rode about half the ride on the highway, stopped several times and shut it off at a gas station and another little shop, and started it up again while it was hot. Don't seem to have any issues. So I think we did well here, made an improvement, fixed a couple of problems, and that's really all you can ask for, I guess. So if you like the video, please click like for me, comment, subscribe to my channel. That way you get to see everything that we got going on here. Hopefully we'll start rolling out a whole lot more content here shortly. I'm still working on getting things set up in the garage here and put away and organized and all that good stuff. But I plan on making a lot more content Let me know what you're interested in, if it's cars or motorcycles or how-to videos or just, me talking or whatever. I can't imagine anybody would be interested in me talking, but let me know and we'll go from there. I appreciate you watching. Thanks.